It is a shocking report. Clearly, things weren't done that should have been done. Children weren't protected. But I think the situation is much better now. Now, we can't afford to be complacent. We've always got to be on our guard. But I would like to reassure you and also your viewers that the situation is much better nowadays.
Yeah, you see, I mean, it's nice that you seek to reassure me, but I look to people like Maggie Oliver. I mean, she runs, I've got so much respect for Maggie. She runs a fantastic foundation. And I know, for example, just in speaking to her, that foundation receives daily contact from young girls that are still experiencing similar scenarios. She says herself, Maggie, in response to this report, that in the past 6 months alone, she's referred 33 serious cases to the same force. So to me, I don't actually feel that reassured that this thing is a historical thing as opposed to a current situation.
I mean, I don't know what cases Maggie's referring to exactly, and obviously any cases of concern. As I say, without having that evidence, I can't really judge it. But as I say, I mean, it would be, in a way, it'd be incredible if agencies weren't taking these cases more seriously and responding to them much more effectively. That just beggars belief, really. And again, I would just like to I mean, yeah, the situation may not be perfect now, but it's definitely much better than it was years ago. And it should be said in respect of this report, I mean, we are going back as far as, I think, 2005. So, 17 years ago we're talking about. Things have definitely improved.
So you're optimistic about the picture now and the responses going forward?
I am. Again, I would say, we can't be complacent. But just to widen out this issue a little bit, it's important to say, as terrible as these cases are, and as badly indeed as some of them may have been dealt with, they constitute only a tiny proportion of the child protection problem in this country. Social services receive something like, in England alone, 600,000 referrals from people concerned about children. And in the large majority of those cases, they're well handled. So it's important not to get these child sexual exploitation cases out of perspective.
Yeah, Bernard, I have to say, I mean, you are indeed the expert, so I bow to your knowledge. But to me, as someone that just kind of talks about these issues, reports on these issues and listens to them, it feels to me, actually, that we here, and I'm broadening my conversation out to reflect what you've just done as well, which is the same. I think you make a very good point that actually this is a small section of child abuse cases. But to me, as a layperson, it feels very much, actually, that we seem to hear more and more and more cases of children being failed by agencies like social services that you reference. If I had £1 for every single time I seem to hear the phrase, lessons will be learned, I'd be a very rich woman. I feel like we don't seem to be learning many lessons when it comes to all this stuff at all.
Well, referring specifically to child sexual exploitation cases, a lot of the reports, a lot of the scandals that we've been coming across in the last few years, they do refer back to cases from a decade, if not 2 decades ago, a bit like Jimmy Savile for that matter. He was eventually exposed, admittedly after his death, but he'd been abusing children and adults for 50 years. So again, I think our ability now to respond to these cases is much improved, and a lot of the cases indeed we are looking into are historical cases. And I take your point, and particularly in respect of these horrendous child murders we hear about, where children, often young children, are killed by their parents. I mean, the research seems to suggest that the numbers of those cases is remaining sort of stubbornly constant, if you would like. But set against that, of course, if we're talking about numbers over 10 or 20 years, the numbers of children in the population has actually risen. So proportionately, on a proportionate basis, children are safer these days. But again, even those child murder cases, they do constitute a tiny proportion, tiny proportion of all child protection cases. And there is research particularly in America, and there's no reason why we think we'd be any different. Indeed, we should be better. But there is research in America to show the amount of child abuse in the population in general is actually going down. You know, the work that agencies are doing, and also much greater public awareness, that is actually cutting the amount of child abuse that's going on.
Yeah, again, I mean, I'm finding this fascinating, what you're telling me, because I would have thought the opposite, especially we've just had this whole scenario where we've been locked down for 2 years. And unfortunately, when you are being abused as a child, often your respite is things like going to school. And, you know, you are often saved by interactions with people, teachers or whoever that might pick up signs, bruises, etc. And we remove that for an awful lot of children for a prolonged period of time. So, again, I bow to your knowledge, but I would have assumed the opposite. It would have been increasing.
Well, again, there is research to suggest that there was indeed a spike in child abuse during COVID, but of course COVID is a very particular phase that, you know, we've all been through, and that's on the decline. Obviously, you know, COVID is receding, and as it recedes, one would expect the amount of child abuse to go back to sort of normal levels, if not lower still. But I do tend to have a quite sort of positive outlook, I suppose, on life in general. And I think if one looks at domestic abuse, for example, homophobia, sexism, I think as society becomes more aware of those issues and more prepared to address them, I think those problems are declining likewise. And I think it's the same with child abuse. I think as we become more aware of it and more prepared to tackle it, I think it is actually on the decrease. And indeed, and I've touched upon this earlier, it would be amazing, in fact, if as our awareness has increased and our ability to respond to it has increased, if those weren't having some impact. I mean, if the problem was getting worse, it would make you wonder what we're all doing.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.